Hey guys, we're back out in the garden. It's Sunday, August 30th, and honestly it feels like someone flipped the switch and turned the fall weather on. It was cold last night. We got down to about 5 degrees Celsius. As you can see, tomatoes kind of took a hit. Everything's slowly coming to the end of its production. Would be nice to, you know, get a little reprieve and a couple weeks of sunshine to give everything the last little chance to ripen up, but you know, things are doing okay. So I figured today we'll take a quick look through the garden and go through some things that we've learned this year. Well, not necessarily that we've learned, but that we're going to try and do better next year. So let's take a look. So crops that we still have left over, as you can see, peppers are still producing. Again, hopefully we get that last little bit of sunshine. Would be nice to ripen everything up. But the Super Shepherds are really good just eating green. So if it comes to that, then we'll just need to eat some green peppers for a little while. Tomatoes are again coming to the end of their life. They really didn't like the cold weather last night, but they are ripening up. We've taken a lot of tomatoes this week. I think we're up to close to 30 pounds of tomatoes that we've harvested this week. The one thing that is really nice, I've said it before, is the weed guard around these plants. Very little weeding during the year. For most of my plants, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, the peppers, I do 3 across. These are 4-foot beds, so they're spaced 1 foot apart, and plant right through the weed guard, and it's awesome. You don't have to weed anything. Maybe just go around the base of the plant and yank out some weeds that show up there. But other than that, it is pretty simple. Now, if you get the woven weed guard with the this little kind of plastic felt backing on it, you can just cut through it, and this will prevent the top woven plastic from fraying. What I normally do is I go through with an old soldering iron and just melt away a little area, a little spot for me to plant through, and that way it definitely will not fray. And I reuse it. I've never actually had to replace any of this weed guard. I just keep using it year after year. I'm going to try and figure out a system to plant the beets and the other closely spaced crops through the weed guard. I think they do a lot better, and with a lot less weeding, it's a lot easier on me. I really don't like weeding these kind of in between these really closely spaced plants. So I'm going to try and find a way to plant the beets next year through the weed guard. The other nice thing about the weed guard is you really don't have to water very much. It tends to hold the moisture down in the soil a lot better than if you just had bare earth. The other thing, back in the tomatoes, is to make sure we gotta find some better stakes. Every time I think that I have put stakes in the ground that will support the weight of the plants, they just end up falling over, and it's a real pain to pick everything back up afterwards. So we are going to try and devise some better stakes for the tomatoes and some smaller stakes for the peppers, because a lot of those plants end up falling over as they develop a lot of weight due to the fruit that they have set. Now with staking, again, you can go online, find lots of videos for staking a variety of different plants. Some do noticeably better. This is the best year I've ever had for cucumbers, and it's the first year that I've grown them up a trellis, and they are still producing the slicing cucumbers. It's been a record year for cucumbers, and there's still tons left to go. The pickling cucumbers did really well. They seem to be suffering a little more from the cold weather than the slicing cucumbers. But again, growing up the trellis has made a dramatic improvement in the yield that we've received from them. And in keeping with staking your plants, we usually try to stake the zucchini. This year, the stakes were very inadequate, and the plants kind of fell over pretty early on. But they made it, and they've done pretty good for the production. The melons are ready to come out, so we'll be harvesting those soon. And the butternut squash are slowly running out of steam, and we will see how many plants we can harvest in the end. So the watermelon plants in the bed are still doing very well. We have a second one starting to grow. I'm not sure it's going to be ready in time, but that first one looks like it will be ready shortly. And the other melon, not sure, I think it's a cantaloupe, should be ready by the time the fall is truly sets in. Again, would be nice to have 2 or 3 weeks of sunshine just to finish everything off. Strawberries still producing. Hopefully they don't get hit too badly by the cold that's coming up. Our second sowing of snow peas, sugar snap peas, are starting to produce. So again, the first year that I've successfully had a second crop of peas, and the beans are now starting to run out of gas. These are the yellow beans that produce first, so they die off first, and the green beans, we've started to harvest those. A lot of the crops that we're harvesting now are being pickled. Just the way the season ends up. And the spaghetti squash starting to produce a few more. Seems to have kind of outrun the powdery mildew that you can still see on those leaves. But a couple new growing tips, and produced a couple more spaghetti squash. All right, and the pumpkin starting to ripen up. Looking forward to the first pumpkin out of the garden. And then the beets still growing away. We'll probably harvest them 2 to 3 weeks depending on how the weather is. Now, as far as I can tell, this has been an above average year in terms of production from this garden. It must have been the soil amendments that I put in the early spring, because it definitely wasn't the weather. This has been a memorable year for how bad the weather has been. We had a late frost, which hit the pepper plants shortly after I planted them out, and that was followed by a couple weeks of really hot and dry weather. It was quite extreme. High 20s, low 30s, and it's just really unusual for us. So if it wasn't the weather, then the amendments must have helped. And I really put a lot of manure in these beds early on in the spring. It just happened by chance. I did some tractor work for a neighbor, and he dropped off a trailer full of horse manure. So all these beds got a really generous helping of manure, and the tomatoes got an extra amendment. We tried out some wood ash in the soil, and it seems to have worked wonders for the tomatoes. This is probably one of the highest yields we've had for our tomato plants. I'll probably end up starting to sprinkle wood ash just in general over all the beds and see how it goes next year. So the other thing that we always strive to do better is pruning, is keeping up on the pruning, especially of tomatoes. These things have so many suckers, side shoots. If you keep up on it, then you have a nice single stalk with lots of tomatoes that ripen up in a timely fashion. What normally happens, we keep on top of it, and then the job doesn't get done for maybe a week, and it ends up with far too many to go through and take care of. And what's happened is, in the past, when I've kind of gone through one plant and really trimmed it back hard, especially with tomatoes, this has happened with tomatoes, not so much other plants, but the tomatoes just don't seem to recover. Something gets in, I don't know what it is, a bug, a virus, who knows. And the plant just dies back and never recovers. So if they get a little too out of control, I just end up leaving them and letting them go. There will be some tomatoes that don't end up ripening up in time. We just pick them all, throw them on the windowsill. If they ripen, that's great. If not, they just go in the compost bin. So we are going to try and kind of keep up on our pruning for next year. And the last one that we will try to improve upon is keeping these plants covered. We're getting better. You can see our blueberry tips, growing tips that aren't eaten by the deer. So that's encouraging. Hopefully we can really increase the blueberry productivity next year. But deer is not chewing on the growing tips helps. The only thing is the covers that we use, the insect netting that we use, you really have to keep it on pretty much full time, and that involves kind of really planning where you're putting certain plants. For example, we have our cabbage in with our Swiss chard and our kale. We harvest Swiss chard and kale fairly regularly, so we're always going in and taking leaves from those plants, and the netting gets left off for a few hours or maybe half a day. That's enough time for the butterflies to get in and for the cabbage to get absolutely covered in caterpillars. So we do have to plan a little bit more and keep broccoli, cauliflower in one bed, stays covered all the time, because you're not harvesting it all the time. You're just taking the head after it has developed. So it involves a little bit of planning, drawing everything out on paper, and just being careful to put the covers back on as soon as possible. The insects get in there at every opportunity, so something to improve upon next year. Alright guys, that's it for this week. I think next weekend we will be harvesting the melons, or at least the ones that are ripe. We'll see how they turned out, how the kids like them, so that should be a lot of fun. First melons from the garden, I can't wait. Anyway, that's it for now, and I'll see you later.